My name is Leah and I'm 33 years old. A civil servant who works in a national administrative agency. Life's been a grind with a hectic schedule, but I'm doing what I've always wanted to do since my student days, so I'm pretty fulfilled. In my personal life, I've been living with my partner Huey for 5 years. We're not officially married, just a common law couple. Huey's parents often say, "It's fine now, but shouldn't you consider getting married for the future?" But we haven't taken that step yet. You see, my family is steeped in male chauvinism. They prioritize the eldest son above all. My parents, and even my grandparents on both sides, have always treated me like I'm worthless just because I'm the eldest daughter. Despite being the first child for my parents and the first grandchild on my dad's side, no one ever showed interest in me. "I have a talent show at school tomorrow, can you come?" I've asked my mom and dad countless times, only to be mocked and told, "If we had free time, we'd rather sleep." They would say, "You're really stupid if you don't understand that," and they'd just make fun of me. I remember feeling heartbroken seeing my friends' parents taking photos and videos during school events. Then, just before I started elementary school, my brother Miles was born. The joy from my parents and grandparents was overwhelming. Even my workaholic dad would rush home if mom texted, "Miles seems a bit feverish, maybe he's caught a cold." They'd both stay up all night taking care of him. So, when I started elementary school, neither of my parents even attended the orientation. They'd tell the school, "We're too busy with our son to care about our daughter." I was alone on my first day of school, watching other families take commemorative photos. Not just my parents, but my grandparents too, acted like Miles was the only grandchild that mattered. In particular, Miles' paternal grandparents, who lived with him, bought him everything he wanted and were happy to take him anywhere he wanted to go. Because of this upbringing, Miles grew up to be a selfish, arrogant person who looked down on everyone else, especially me. He'd often take my food or destroy my belongings for fun. And no one in the family would bat an eye. Once, he tore up a book I'd borrowed from a friend. When I scolded him, my family said, "It's just a book. You can replace it." That's exactly right. That's why girls are so troublesome. That's right. It's best for boys to be energetic. Miles is growing up wonderfully, they'd add, praising him without a hint of criticism. Miles would just smirk, showing no signs of remorse. This cycle had been ongoing since Miles was born. I grew up without feeling any warmth or love from anyone in my family. I had just one wish: to attend college as far away from home as possible, essentially cutting ties with my family. At home, my brother Miles was always in the way, or I'd get tasked with chores that interrupted my studies. So, I hid the books in libraries and empty classrooms after school. To cover college application fees and travel expenses for school tours and exams, I worked part-time at grocery stores. All the effort paid off. I got into a prestigious university. My parents and grandparents couldn't care less. "If you want to go, go. But don't expect any help from us," they said. I saw that coming a mile away. I had already applied for every scholarship I could and planned to live in a dorm to minimize costs. Plus, I had my best friend Selena. We'd been friends since elementary school, and she and her parents knew all about my family situation. Selena's dad worked at the same company as mine, albeit in a different department. My dad's chauvinistic behavior was often a topic of discussion at his workplace. My mom and Selena's mom even went to the same school, and she told me my mom had similar domineering personalities like my dad. When Selena and I first became friends, her parents were worried. "Friends with the daughter of that couple?" But they warmed up to me after seeing how much Selena praised me and how I stood by her when she was being isolated by other girls in class. If it weren't for you, Leah, my school life would have been miserable. Thank you, Selena would say. But the truth is, I don't know what I would have done without her and her parents. They were the ones who kept me going. I was able to survive because of Selena, who laughed and said, "Leah, you be you." And Selena's parents, who always offered a helping hand. Without them, I might have lost my way or given up on life altogether. As for college, Selena had already decided to attend a local university. "I've got nothing to do until graduation, so let me help you, Leah," she said. She helped me with the nitty-gritty details of placement exam logistics, like booking hotels and flights. On the day I left for college, my family didn't bother to see me off. But Selena and her parents came to the airport. As we said our goodbyes, she handed me an envelope. "This is a farewell gift from all of us. You'll need stuff for dorm life, right?" Inside was $2,000. I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "Take it. We'll always be friends, but I won't be able to help you like before," she said, tears in her eyes. I never touched that money during my college years. Holding on to that envelope reminded me of Selena and her family, giving me the strength to keep going. After graduating from university, I went on to graduate school, which was my dream. I passed the civil service exam and took my first steps into the working world. Selena and I kept in touch through texts, and she even visited me during family vacations. Selena ended up working as an administrative staff member at a local hospital after graduating from college. After 8 years, I returned to my hometown for the first time in 12 years. I was invited to a wedding by a doctor who worked at the same hospital as her and was getting married. During those 12 years, my maternal grandparents had passed away, but my paternal grandparents, who lived with us, were still healthy. My brother Miles had enrolled in a prestigious middle school, considered the most challenging in our area, the same year I went to college. My parents were proud, saying things like, "Miles is just like me, so talented. We're excited for his future." Absolutely, we might even have to send him abroad for studies. But Miles, who was considered a child prodigy in elementary school, found himself among equally capable students in his new school. He was shocked when he scored average on his first exam. "This can't be the real me. I'm better than this." Instead of putting in the effort, he blamed everyone else, teachers, classmates, the school, even timing, for his shortcomings. By the time he reached 9th grade, the school suggested he consider transferring, saying it would be less stressful for him. But both Miles and my parents too couldn't accept the reality due to their pride, and Miles continued on to high school. As feared, he couldn't keep up and eventually dropped out. At that time, I was in grad school. My parents suddenly asked, "Aren't there any schools there that Miles could get into? The more prestigious, the better." Of course, a school with tradition would be ideal for Miles. "Don't you know any influential professors?" I told them that was unrealistic. They accused me of being cold and heartless, but I maintained that what's impossible is impossible, and eventually, we lost contact. According to Selena, who had stayed in our hometown, my parents eventually enrolled Miles in an online high school. They made excuses like, "Our son is too exceptional for regular education. He would only attract jealousy and make life difficult for himself." Miles graduated from the online high school, went to a local college, and got a job at a subsidiary of my dad's company through my grandfather's influence. I met Miles again when I attended Selena's wedding. I had returned to my hometown 2 days before the wedding, at Selena's request. "I have something I want to talk about," she had said. I wasn't keen on visiting my parents, so I stayed at the hotel where the wedding was to take place. I spent some relaxing time with Selena, going to the spa and such. We were invited to dinner by Selena's parents, and it was at the hotel restaurant that I ran into Miles and my parents. They didn't recognize me at first. I guess that's understandable. When I lived at home, I was skinny and didn't have the luxury of caring about my appearance like other girls. It was only when my parents greeted Selena's parents that they realized I was their daughter. Leah, is that you? You're back in town? You've changed. Are you free later? Maybe we could. They were oddly friendly, but I wasn't in the mood. I'm heading back right after Selena's reception, so I don't have time, I said, and quickly left. I did make eye contact with Miles, but to be honest, I wouldn't have recognized him on the street. He had lost his youthful look and now had a face that oozed cunning. After the wedding, I returned to my condo. Soon after, I started receiving messages from my parents and Miles, who had forcibly obtained my number from Selena's parents. According to a message from Selena's father, who apologized for giving them my contact, it seemed they wanted me to attend Miles's wedding. Miles is getting married? Yes, apparently to the younger sister of a college classmate. She's only 21 and quite beautiful. What does that have to do with me attending? According to Selena's father, Miles had gotten his job through my grandfather's connections, but his self-esteem far exceeded his actual abilities. He also had a bad habit of looking down on people and would say things like, "No need to listen to people who've stayed in this backwater town," making him unpopular. That's why when he announced his wedding, almost everyone from colleagues to bosses gave excuses like, "I planned to have a terrible cold that day," or "My tarot card reading advised against going in the direction of the venue." Planning to have a cold, huh? I see. My parents and Miles didn't want to be outdone by the number of attendees from the bride's side. Even though I'm not the most exciting sister or daughter, they seemed to think it was better to have me there, given that I have a graduate degree from a prestigious university and a government job. I was annoyed by their shallow thinking. Competing over the number of attendees is ridiculous. But if I kept ignoring them, they'd surely pester Selena's father, saying, "Tell our daughter to get in touch." So, I reluctantly replied to Miles' message. He said, "Long time no talk. You must be happy to be useful to the family for once." I ignored his petty comment and decided to attend the wedding just to minimize the hassle. Fast forward to the wedding day, 2 months later. The bride was as beautiful as Selena's father had described, and she seemed genuinely kind and straightforward. I wondered why such a wonderful woman would marry someone like Miles. But I decided not to pry and just play my role as the groom's sister. After the wedding, Miles and his new wife left for their honeymoon. No one tried to keep me around, and I had nothing to say to my parents or grandparents. So, I briefly visited Selena's home, said my greetings, and left. Time passed without any contact until Miles suddenly reached out, inviting me to come see the cherry blossoms. It wasn't a grand event like the National Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C., but my hometown also had a botanical garden with cherry trees. It's a common seasonal event. However, I was suspicious. It turned out, the real agenda wasn't cherry blossoms, but convincing me to give up my inheritance rights. Apparently, there's a big land development plan near our family home. A major developer was planning to buy up the area to build a large condo complex. Real estate transactions were heating up around our family home. Our home was situated right in the planned development area. Our great-grandfather used to run a firewood and charcoal business there, so the property was quite large. It included not just the house, but also a sizable parking area. It seems Miles and my parents, enticed by the rising land value, want to ensure I didn't get a share of the inheritance in the future. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, they say. I never really cared about inheritance, but Huey once advised me. Even if you don't need it, it might be good to settle things once and for all. So, I decided to go back home. I booked the same hotel I stayed in before, and I planned to meet my family at the botanical garden. Then came the day. I arrived at the designated spot and found my Asiel, whom I'd met only once at a wedding, sitting alone on a bench. I was 3 hours early, but she was there even before me. She seemed well prepared, but her face was pale, and dark circles were evident under her eyes. Do you remember me? I'm Leah, Miles' sister. We met at the wedding. Upon hearing this, she stood up in surprise, but almost immediately stumbled. I quickly reached out to catch her. She was surprisingly light and frail. It was like looking at myself back in high school. I'm sorry, thank you, she said. Her name was Carolyn, if I remember correctly. Carolyn, right? If you're not feeling well, don't push yourself. Let's sit down. We sat back down, but the bench was cold, probably from the rain earlier. Upon closer inspection, Carolyn's apron and hair were damp, as if she'd been caught in the rain. What time did you get here? We agreed to meet at noon, right? Yes, but I was told to secure the best spot for cherry blossom viewing, so I've been sitting here all night to make sure no one else took it. This might be the best spot for cherry blossoms, but you didn't have to go through all this trouble. But if I don't do as Miles says, not just him but Trevor and Jasmine will scold me too. This is just how it always is. Trevor and Jasmine are the names of my dad and mom. Hearing Carolyn's story, I felt a rage that made my whole body tremble. I immediately took off my coat and put it on Carolyn, then sent a message to Selena. That afternoon, while Selena and I were taking a break, she got an internal call. I think it's probably from Leah's family. How should I respond? I wrote down what I wanted Selena to tell my parents and Miles and handed it to her. Sure enough, within an hour, Miles and my parents rushed in. Hey! What do you mean, there's no reason to see you anymore? Exactly! We had to search all over the garden because you broke the appointment and didn't even contact us. And finally, someone told us they saw you and Selena together. And that person said you were with my wife too. The three of them started yelling, but Selena sternly told them to keep their voices down as we were in a hospital. But their silence lasted only a moment. The next second, they turned to Selena. Who are you? Don't butt in. If you're not family, leave. They barked. However, Selena, who deals with various patients and their families daily as a senior administrator in the hospital, wasn't fazed. I'm not an outsider. I helped bring your wife from the botanical garden to this hospital. Right now, Carolyn is receiving treatment and resting in her room. So, you can't see her. Hearing this, Miles and my parents became even angrier. Why do I need permission to see my own wife? Explain what's going on. They were unbearably loud. Fed up, I first turned to my parents. Keep it down. Can't you remember being told to be quiet just a minute ago? Is there something wrong with your memory? Then to Miles, who was standing next to my parents with a red face, I said, You dare call yourself a husband while mistreating your wife? How ironic. Just then, Huey appeared, accompanied by 2 police officers. All right, here we are. This is the husband and relatives of the victim I mentioned earlier. As Huey pointed to the 3, their faces, which had been so red, suddenly tensed and turned pale. What's going on? Why are the police here? Victim? You mean Carolyn? Isn't this an exaggeration? She just felt a little sick. Stammering, Miles and my parents tried to argue back. Huey handed them his business card. I should have mentioned earlier. I'm Leah's partner and a lawyer. From now on, I'll be representing Carolyn. Nice to meet you. Representing? My wife? What do you mean, representing? Making a woman sit alone outdoors overnight in temperatures below 41 degrees Fahrenheit just to secure a cherry blossom viewing spot is far from normal by any standard. But still, isn't it strange for a lawyer to get involved in something like this? When a client asks for representation, it's natural for a lawyer to provide it. Besides, you guys canceled Carolyn's cell phone contract over a year ago and hardly give her any money. What if something had happened while she was out there? But nothing did happen, so... That's beside the point. Can't you imagine what would happen if someone went without food or water for nearly half a day? You're not kids anymore. But... Moreover, when you told her to secure the spot, you didn't even give her time to dress properly for the outdoors. You even locked her out immediately. How is this not malicious behavior? Huey spoke smoothly, and the two police officers beside him nodded with stern expressions. I chimed in. When I met her, she was freezing and looked pale. That's why we brought her to this hospital in Selena's car right away. Actually, I was at the botanical garden 3 hours before meeting Miles and my parents because I had plans to meet Selena. I had texted Selena that I was meeting Miles and my parents under the guise of cherry blossom viewing. She suggested, "Why not take a stroll in the botanical garden to calm your nerves before that?" I agreed, as I was feeling a bit uneasy. Thanks to arriving much earlier, I was able to find Carolyn in poor condition. Panicked, I immediately called Selena, who was still at home. Her husband, a doctor, advised to bring her to the hospital as soon as possible and even came to pick us up as he was on his way to work. Thanks to that, Carolyn received prompt medical attention, and her body temperature and color soon returned to normal. However, based on Selena's husband's diagnosis that she was both physically and mentally weak, she was transferred to the inpatient ward. In the meantime, after hearing Carolyn's story during the ride to the hospital and between exams, I consulted with Selena and contacted Huey, who promptly came over. Huey then acted as Carolyn's attorney, consulting with the police and contacting her family. As far as I'm concerned, your actions against my client could be considered assault. Naturally, I plan to file a complaint in that regard. Upon hearing this, Miles' face changed color. Assault? That's a bit much. I didn't physically harm her or anything. Assault doesn't just refer to physical injuries. Past cases have defined it as adversely affecting a person's health. Adversely affecting health? She just felt a little sick. There's no need to make a big deal out of it. Whether it's a big deal or not is for the police and prosecutors to decide. As Huey said this, the police officers standing behind us said, "Let's take you somewhere to hear more about this," and led the three of them away. After getting an earful from the police, Miles and his parents returned home only to find Carolyn's family waiting for them, looking furious. According to what Carolyn later told me, her brother had always thought of Miles as a bright and caring friend. When Miles started dating Carolyn, her brother was thrilled. But then, Miles told him that Carolyn said, "I've always hated my family. Now that I'm married, I've finally cut ties. I told them to not contact me anymore." After that, her brother was blocked on all forms of communication. He even visited their home but was turned away, being told, "She's crying and doesn't want to see you. Please leave." On the other hand, Carolyn was told by Miles. "Your brother never liked you. He begged me to take you off his hands. I only married you out of obligation, not love." My parents and grandparents also kept telling her, "You're a burden. Just be grateful we're putting up with you. You're a burden. Just be grateful we're putting up with you." Clearly, they were trying to isolate Carolyn from her family to use her for their own convenience. What a despicable bunch. But all their schemes came to light because of this incident. Carolyn's family, who rushed over after hearing the news, took turns staying with her until she recovered and was discharged from the hospital. Although the police ultimately let them off with a stern warning, in a small town like mine, social condemnation can be far worse than legal repercussions. When we took Carolyn to the hospital, the three of them showed up at the botanical garden only to find it occupied by another group, which led to a heated argument. Word spread quickly about the incident, and rumors started flying. Miles and my dad felt so humiliated they ended up quitting their jobs. As a result, it seems that he repeatedly treated his young wife so badly that he even sent her to the hospital. Oh, I heard he went on a rampage that even the police were called. Even the husband's parents got together and took his wife mentally. Miles and Dad quit because they couldn't stand it anymore, as these rumors spread, with some exaggeration, not just in their workplace, but also in their neighborhood. Moreover, a big land development deal fell through, causing property values to plummet. Miles and his family, who had bought up neighboring lands, ended up in massive debt. Carolyn's family then demanded a divorce, compensation, and a division of assets, pushing everyone to the brink. My grandparents lost all their assets and had to move into a care facility after the shock of being kicked out of their home. Miles and his parents, now facing a hefty divorce settlement, begged Huey, who was representing Carolyn, for help and mediation. But Huey simply responded, "You must be joking. If you try to contact Leah or me for money, we'll have to respond legally." I had changed my number while my parents and Miles were being questioned by the police, and they didn't even know my current address or workplace. So, there's no way they could contact me directly anymore. Now that I'm free from all the complications related to my family home, especially since my grandparents' inheritance is gone, I feel utterly liberated. Although he was my father-in-law, it was a nuisance. Dirty and smelly, I'm relieved he's gone. I was always on edge, wondering how long he would live. At the back door of the church, that was Kathy talking to someone. I stood there, shaking with anger. Unforgivable. In place of my late husband Oliver, I decided to expose Kathy's true nature and seek revenge. I watched her quietly with a steely gaze. My name is Flora, 76 years old. I live with my husband and eldest son. But it's not an ordinary family of three. My husband Oliver developed early-onset Alzheimer's disease. Now, his diabetes has worsened and he's bedridden. We hired a home caregiver, and I also take care of him. Our son Floyd is 46. He's successful at work, now a manager. But he's not married. I envy friends who travel with their spouses, celebrating their children's marriages and grandchildren, but I'm happy we're living comfortably. Then, one day, Floyd said, "I've decided to get married." I was so surprised I almost fainted. I had thought Floyd would never get married. "Really? Marriage? You're not being deceived, are you?" I asked dramatically, and Floyd laughed. "No way. She's from a company we deal with, a really nice girl. She always greets me with a smile." After years without celebrations, I felt increasingly happy for my son. Later, we had a family meeting. His fiancée was Kathy. At the hotel, she arrived in a beautiful dress and greeted me with the calm smile Floyd mentioned. "Flora, nice to meet you. I look forward to being part of your family." She's 34, 12 years younger than Floyd, and I was impressed by her polite greeting and demeanor. I wondered why such a wonderful lady chose Floyd. Nice to meet you too. I'm sorry my husband couldn't come. Please, don't apologize. I know about Oliver's condition. But as a family member, let me know if I can be of any help. Her words moved me to tears. I was overwhelmed with gratitude for the good person who came into our lives. I felt embarrassed for even suspecting that Floyd might be getting deceived. Also, my parents couldn't make it either. We couldn't adjust their schedules, I'm sorry. I've told them about the marriage, and they trust my choice, so please don't worry about our family. Kathy said this with a cheerful smile. Indeed, she was here alone. For a moment, I thought it was odd for parents to miss a family meeting, but trusting Kathy's words, I thought she must be a trustworthy daughter and didn't probe further. Then, they got married and started living with me. They didn't have a wedding ceremony, but took wedding photos together. I had hoped for a ceremony, but I suppressed my feelings, knowing it's not just for the parents. A few days later, the wedding photos arrived. Holding back my eagerness, I said to Kathy, "Your wedding photos have arrived." Kathy happily took the envelope from me. Wow, they've already arrived. Floyd will be thrilled. I'll put them in our room. However, she didn't show any intention of opening them in front of me and took them to their bedroom. Of course, I understood they should see them first, but it was strange that she didn't even seem to want to open them. I kept smiling, though feeling a bit uneasy. Some time later, Kathy quit her job and offered to help me with the caregiving. I was really touched. Taking care of someone else's family is hard to do unless that is your job. It's enough that you're willing to think about it. But I am family, right? Don't worry. Kathy insisted. So, I asked her to check on Oliver when I was busy and be his conversation partner when she had time. Leave the diapers to me or the home caregiver. Even just asking him if he needs anything is a big help, and talking is good rehabilitation. Kathy readily agreed. But I couldn't understand why I hadn't asked Kathy for help with the caregiving before. Sure, I was considerate. But maybe I didn't fully trust her. At the same time, I felt bad for doubting her, knowing she was a good person. One day, Oliver said, "I think Kathy dislikes me." What? I was surprised. But Oliver had Alzheimer's. His words often lacked consistency. I reassured him. That's not true. She's a wonderful person who cares about family. No. That's wrong. Why would you say that? Then, Oliver looked me in the eyes and said, "She looks at me with a mocking smile. It's scary." I fell silent at his words. Then laughed it off. It's nice to be smiled at by someone young, isn't it? I knew it was a delusion, but the thought of how Kathy might really be looking at Oliver sent chills down my spine. Then, one day, almost forgetting about it, I received a call from the home caregiver who visits Oliver. A call, even though she visits daily? Confused, I answered, and she said, "I need to talk to you about something." I was wondering what it was about. The words came out was never expected. Floyd's wife Kathy. I think it's better if she doesn't get involved with Oliver anymore. Why? What happened? Oliver seems frightened of her. Maybe she's saying something unpleasant to him. Her words reminded me of what Oliver had said. If Kathy was really saying such things to Oliver, I felt responsible for asking her to check on him. After hanging up, I muttered, "I can't just sit back." I hurried to Oliver's room. "Oliver? I need to ask you something." But it was too late to talk to Oliver. Just hours after eating his meal cheerfully, he had peacefully passed away and gone to heaven. I didn't remember much about what happened next. I was busy making calls, arranging for a doctor's visit, but the doctor only shook his head. Before I knew it, I was at the church Floyd had arranged. The date must have changed, but I haven't slept or eaten, so I've lost all sense of time. My body and soul are exhausted, and instead of feeling relieved from caregiving, I'm overwhelmed with loneliness. It should have been hard, but all I can remember is Oliver when he was healthy. Thinking of that, I just couldn't stop crying. Flora. While Floyd was busy as the family representative, Kathy was there, concerned about me, staying by my side. Her parents couldn't come for the farewell due to the distance, but they sent a wreath and a letter through Kathy. Though I was still troubled by the home caregiver's words, I couldn't believe that Kathy, raised in such a wonderful family, would harass Oliver. Then, someone appeared in front of Kathy and me. Please accept my sincere condolences. A few people greeted us deeply. Kathy stood up to greet them on my behalf. They seemed to be from Floyd's company. Kathy must know them from her time at the client company. Flora, please stay seated. Kathy told me, then thanked them for their attendance and led them to Oliver. I was completely reassured by her demeanor. And the wake ended. Gradually coming to terms with Oliver's passing, I felt guilty for leaving everything to Floyd and Kathy and started greeting the attendees. But most had left, and I couldn't see Kathy. Where's Kathy? She's not here. Maybe she's still seeing people off. I'll go check. I told Floyd and headed to the parking lot. Then, from behind the church, I heard Kathy's voice. I found you. I muttered to myself. It was dark, and I was likely unseen from the other side. However, Kathy, illuminated by the church's back door light, seemed to be talking to a man. It's finally over. I stopped at those words. Well, it went according to plan, didn't it? But still, he was such a nuisance. Dirty and smelly, I'm glad he's gone. I was always restless, wondering how long he would live. I turned pale. Was that really Kathy? But I clearly heard her voice, and it was Kathy in front of me. So, when are you divorcing? Once the inheritance comes in, I'll transfer it to my bank account, then probably. That guy seemed to have less than I thought, but Floyd should inherit at least $100,000. Floyd got himself caught by a real piece. It's his fault for being deceived. I stood there, trembling with anger. I had suspected something was off. Kathy targeted Floyd for his inheritance. I couldn't forgive her. I swore to myself. Kathy then entered through the back door. The man, unaware I had witnessed yesterday's scene, left in a white luxury car and appeared at the funeral the next day as if nothing had happened. Ah, Richard, thank you for coming on your day off. Floyd greeted him. Apparently, he was a subordinate at Floyd's company. No, Floyd. I know it's tough, but please don't overdo it. Thank you. Thank you. Kathy also greeted politely beside Floyd. Just yesterday, they were laughing and chatting like close friends. When I thought this, I noticed his simple ring on the left ring finger. A simple ring was worn on the ring finger. The ring indicated he was married, and at the same time, I wondered if he could be involved with Kathy. The reason they stayed till the end, talking in a secluded spot, and the way they hid their relationship today, unlike their friendly interaction yesterday, all felt off. It didn't take long for my suspicions to turn into certainty. They exchanged glances and laughed together, trying not to be noticed by anyone. How inappropriate. But first, I had a duty to see Oliver off. I managed to hide my anger and fulfill my duties until the end. A few days after the funeral, I finally calmed down and told Floyd first. I mentioned the talk with the home caregiver, the conversation with Richard, and many other things that felt off. Initially, Floyd laughed it off, saying it was all in my head and impossible. If Floyd didn't believe me, I had to consider what to do next. Seeing me troubled, he said, "Let's drop this topic. Do you have any other concerns?" I think it's all Mom's misunderstanding. Desperate to make him believe Kathy's wrongdoings, I blurted out. By the way, what about the wedding photos? I haven't seen them. Wedding photos? Haven't they arrived yet? Floyd asked, puzzled. I replied, "They've arrived long ago, and Kathy put them away." Really? Why didn't she tell me they arrived? I don't know. You should ask her. Floyd asked Kathy that day, in front of me. Kathy looked momentarily flustered but quickly composed herself and said, "Oh, those. I sent them to my parents' house to show them. You know, they haven't met Floyd yet, and I wanted to show him off. I'll ask them to send it back." She was quite talkative, I thought. Indeed, she had always been explanatory. As if hiding lies by talking about things no one had asked. Floyd almost seemed convinced, so without wasting a moment, I said to her, "I would like to see them too. Can you get just the photos sent first? Maybe I should call them." At my words, Kathy hurriedly said, "No, my parents are not good with relative relations." "Oh, but they wrote a letter besides sending a wreath at the funeral? They seem very polite for people who are bad with relatives." Kathy fell silent. Seeing this, Floyd must have felt something was off too. "Call your parents right now. I want to greet them." Kathy still didn't move. I exchanged glances with Floyd. I couldn't fathom her thoughts, but it was clear she was hiding something. In the end, she never contacted her parents, and we never saw the wedding photos. Probably, they were already thrown away. I think she didn't have a wedding because she planned to divorce from the start. Regret fills me, thinking if I had paid attention to my feelings back then, I might have realized her true nature sooner and spared Oliver from suffering. That's why I'm determined not to let her have her way. From that day, Kathy became distant. Worried about her true identity being revealed and possibly being driven out of the house. Then, I received a call from the dispatch company of the home caregiver who took care of Oliver. Apparently, there was an issue with Oliver's diary during an audit, and they wanted to discuss it. That day, 2 people, seemingly from the health department, arrived at our house with a tense atmosphere. Actually, there are descriptions in the home caregiver's diary suggesting that a family member was abusing Mr. Oliver. Abuse? I was so shocked that I exclaimed loudly. "What? How could? I've always been careful." "Please calm down. Here is the home caregiver's diary." I looked at the diary handed to me by the officer. Then, I saw shocking words. April 13th, report of Oliver saying he was hit by Kathy. However, no bruises were found, and it seemed to be due to his dementia. I felt tense reading these words. Seeing my reaction, the officer continued. May 7th, upon visiting, Kathy was seen leaving Oliver's room. When asked what she said to him, he reported she told him to go away. For several days after, he was listless and became fearful when she was mentioned, so it was reported to Flora. That was the last entry in the diary. That was the day Oliver passed away. My hands started shaking, and I couldn't stop my tears. Now that Oliver is gone, we can't know the truth for sure, but may we speak with Kathy? I nodded quietly several times. It may not be the direct cause, but to hear go away on the day he passed away. It feels like that was the cause, from a family's point of view. I told the health department officers that Kathy was upstairs. Concerned about my tears, they headed upstairs together. Who's there? What do you want? Kathy, shouting loudly upstairs, apparently refused to talk to the officers after learning their reason for visiting, saying, I don't know anything. Oliver had dementia, it's not my fault. If you refuse to talk, we'll have to involve the police and conduct an investigation. As soon as Kathy heard the officer's loud voice, she stopped making noise. She must have stopped resisting. Can we talk to you at the health department, not here? Out of concern for me, they decided to talk with her at the health department instead. As Kathy came downstairs, our eyes met. Flora, please tell them it's a misunderstanding. Her face pale, she begged me for help. But after seeing the diary, her words didn't resonate with me. Reflect on your actions and explain yourself. Kathy must have thought I would support her. Surprised by my unexpected words, she was lost for words. It was past noon when the health department officers arrived, but she didn't return until late at night. When I explained everything to Floyd, who returned home earlier, he turned pale with anger. Finally realizing Kathy's true nature, he talked about divorce.
Wait. There's something else that bothers me.
I then told him about the suspicious relationship between Kathy and Richard, whom she met at the back door on the day of the funeral.
She was having an affair?
Even knowing Kathy's true nature, the shock was evident, and Floyd slumped down.
I can't be sure. But it didn't sound like a conversation with an employee from a business partner.
Floyd sighed at my words.
Let's pretend we don't know anything for a while and observe the situation,
he suggested. I nodded in agreement, thinking about what to do next. Kathy returned home late that day. She was exhausted and said she couldn't eat.
I did nothing wrong, but nobody believes me. Even you, Flora, it's unfair.
Kathy burst into tears. She seemed greatly disheartened, having been scolded thoroughly by the health department. Later, I was contacted by the health department, who said I could file a complaint on behalf of Oliver. Kathy doesn't seem to be reflecting, and I don't plan to let her off either. Things are about to get busy. Floyd hired a detective to keep an eye on Kathy's actions. Soon enough, evidence surfaced. Kathy and Richard met secretly 3 times in 1 week. Moreover, Richard would meet Kathy while supposedly out on sales visits and go to a hotel. Naturally, this was grounds for his dismissal.
Richard's outings were supposedly for prospecting new clients. Next time he says that, let's set up a stakeout.
I decided to get notified when he left under that pretext. That day came quickly. After lunch, Kathy left without saying where she was going. As I suspected, Floyd called. Rushing to the meeting place, Floyd was already there, looking defeated. Though expected, I was also at a loss for words. In his line of sight were, as anticipated, Richard and Kathy. Unaware of us, they walked arm in arm into the hotel. 2 hours later, they emerged the same way, and Floyd and I confronted them.
What the hell do you two think you're doing? Floyd!
At Floyd's voice, the two turned, their faces turning pale. Floyd stood before them, glaring at Kathy and then Richard.
What is this? Explain.
It was daytime in a hotel district. Nearby was a supermarket, attracting various onlookers.
This is...
Kathy, panicking, moved away from Richard, her face pale and eyes darting.
So, you two were in this kind of relationship?
I also followed and shouted loudly at the two of them. It seemed that Kathy finally realized I was there because of my voice. And my voice probably drew the attention of the onlookers around us. One of the bystanders said,
Isn't that Richard? You know, Sharon from the kindergarten's father. Really? Wow, an affair?
Apparently, they knew Richard. I knew Richard was married, but I didn't know he had a child. Hearing those words, Richard fled with a pale face.
Wait, hold on.
Kathy called after him, but Richard likely couldn't hear her anymore.
We're getting a divorce. And of course, you'll pay a hefty settlement.
At Floyd's words, Kathy, pale-faced, sat down on the spot, crying. Afterward, the complaint I filed was accepted, and I was told I could seek compensation from Kathy on Oliver's behalf. Currently, I'm in discussions with a lawyer. In the meantime, Kathy and Floyd divorced. The inheritance originally meant for Oliver went entirely to Floyd, and Kathy was sued for the affair's damages. Richard, who had the affair during work hours, was fired. His family found out, leading to his divorce as well. Kathy was now faced with demands for compensation from Richard's family. Now she regrets her actions, but it's too late. It turned out she had approached Floyd for money, and her parents didn't even know about her marriage. After all the commotion, we finally met her parents, who deeply apologized. It turns out she had arranged the wreath and letters herself. To go to such lengths to make herself appear as a good wife to us, I'm astounded at her meticulous deceit. But in the end, her marriage left her with nothing but debt. This experience will surely be a lifelong barrier for her. Afterward, life with Floyd alone began. With everything over, there's relief but also loneliness. However, a few years later, Floyd said he was getting married. After Kathy, I couldn't approve, but the woman Floyd brought was the home caregiver who had always looked after Oliver.
I never expected this connection, but I'm glad to meet you again. Please let me visit Oliver's grave.
I knew her well. And I thought, with her, Floyd could surely be happy. As I believed, a year after their marriage, a lovely baby was born. I never thought I'd become a grandmother, so every day is filled with happiness. My goal now is to stay healthy to watch this child grow. And someday, when I reunite with Oliver in heaven, I want to watch over our son's family together from above.